Rome, the empire of marble, legions, emperors, and glory. But beneath all the statues and speeches, there was always another Rome, the dirty Rome, dripping with lust, cruelty, and scandal. And no emperor showed that side of Rome more than Caligula. He was supposed to be the golden boy, the savior of the empire. Instead, he became the nightmare of senators, the shame of noble families, and the most perverted ruler the world had ever seen. This was a man who slept with his sisters, a man who turned his palace into a brothel, a man who made Rome's elite crawl like dogs and worship him as a living god. So tonight, let's go deep into the dark chambers of Rome's most perverted emperor. This is the story of Caligula. Before the monster, there was the boy. Caligula was born Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus in 12 CE, the son of Germanicus, Rome's most beloved general. Germanicus was everything Rome admired: brave, noble, handsome. The people adored him, and when he toured the army camps, he brought little Gaius with him, dressed up in a tiny soldier's uniform, wearing little boots. The soldiers laughed and cheered, calling him Caligula, Little Boots. The nickname stuck, and Rome fell in love with the boy. But fate is cruel. Germanicus died young, and whispers spread he was poisoned. The little boy, who had been everyone's favorite, grew up in the shadows of power and in the twisted palace of the Emperor Tiberius. And let me tell you, Tiberius's palace was no normal palace. The Emperor Tiberius had retreated to the island of Capri, and Capri was no paradise. Imagine a palace filled with children, stolen from noble families, trained for one thing: to satisfy the emperor. Tiberius turned his villa into a playground of sex and cruelty. Historians whisper about little fish, children forced to swim between the emperor's thighs. Others were trained to perform unspeakable acts, and young Caligula grew up in this world. He watched, he learned, and maybe he enjoyed it. When Tiberius finally died, Caligula was 24, and Rome, desperate for hope, cheered him as their new emperor. The people thought they were getting a savior. What they got was their worst nightmare. At first, Caligula was kind. He freed prisoners, restored banished nobles, and threw games for the people. But just months into his reign, he fell gravely ill. Some say it was poison. Others say it was epilepsy. He survived. But when he recovered, something had changed. The charming young man was gone, and in his place was a man consumed by paranoia, lust, and perversion. The first whispers started with his sisters, Agrippina, Julia, and most of all, Drusilla. Caligula adored Drusilla. He paraded her at feasts. He treated her like his wife. And everyone in Rome whispered, "He's sleeping with her." When Drusilla died suddenly, some say of illness, others say Caligula poisoned her in a jealous rage. He wept like a widow. He declared her a goddess, ordering sacrifices in her name. Rome was scandalized. The whispers weren't whispers anymore. The emperor was in bed with his own sister, and he didn't even try to hide it. But incest wasn't enough for Caligula. He turned part of his palace into a brothel. Yes, the palace of Rome, where emperors ruled, now became a house of prostitution. And who worked there? Not common prostitutes, the wives of senators, the daughters of noble families, forced to serve Caligula's guests, while he watched or joined. And to pay for his endless lust, he taxed the people of Rome, then pocketed the money to fund his orgies. Imagine it: Rome's greatest generals, senators, priests, watching helplessly as their wives and daughters were degraded, while the emperor laughed. Caligula didn't just want pleasure, He wanted humiliation. Caligula loved mocking the proud men of Rome. He invited senators to lavish feasts, then took their wives into another room, slept with them, and came back describing in detail how good or how bad they were. He forced nobles to kiss his feet, made generals run beside his chariot like slaves, gasping for air while he laughed, and all the while he reminded them, I am not just your emperor, I am your god. Of course, everyone knows the story of Incitatus, his horse, a marble stable, a jeweled collar, servants feeding it oats, mixed with gold flakes. Caligula made the horse a priest, and he threatened to make it consul, Rome's highest political office. Some say it was madness, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was mockery, a way of telling the senators, you're so worthless. Even my horse is more important than you. But lust and humiliation weren't enough. Caligula's cruelty went further. At his banquets, prisoners were dragged out and executed for his entertainment. Parents were forced to watch their children die. He fed men to wild beasts while eating his dinner. He demanded temples to himself, statues, sacrifices. He ordered a colossal statue of himself, placed in the Temple of Jerusalem, one of the most sacred sites in the world. For Caligula, sex, death, and power were all the same thing. Rome wasn't an empire anymore. It was his playground. But Rome could only take so much. Even the Praetorian Guard, his own bodyguards, despised him. On January 24th, 41 CE, after a performance at the theater, Caligula walked down a corridor. A group of guards ambushed him. Daggers flashed. He was stabbed over 30 times. His wife and young daughter were murdered too. After just 4 years, Rome's nightmare was over, and the people celebrated. Caligula's name became legend, a symbol of lust, madness, and corruption. Historians still argue how much was true, how much was rumor. Maybe some stories were exaggerated by his enemies. But even if half of it is true, it's enough to make Caligula one of the most perverted rulers in history. Rome wanted a savior, but what it got was a monster. And 2,000 years later, we still remember him, not for his glory, but for his lust, his cruelty, and his perversion.